the role, purpose, etc., is not to be, a celebrity, a figure. This actually, the actor's purpose is to dissolve into another world.
What's going on, everybody? My name is Hassiem Mohammed, and you are listening to The Actor's Instrument, where we discuss the essential qualities you need to stand out in the entertainment industry. If you haven't already, please smash that subscribe button or follow us if you're streaming. Helps out a ton. In the opening episode of Max's new miniseries, The Penguin, Oz Cobb, played by Colin Farrell, talks of his hero, the man who the Penguin idolized and wanted to be like. This character he speaks of, Rex Calabrese, played by Louis Cancelmi, is joining us on The Actor's Instrument today. Men's Health describes today's guest, Louis Cancelmi, as one of the best crime figure actors in recent memory. In addition to The Penguin, Louis has recently appeared in Martin Scorsese's The Irishman and Killers of the Flower Moon. On TV, he could be seen on all 7 seasons of Billions, Boardwalk Empire, and FX's A Murder at the End of the World, among many, many other film and TV projects. Louis, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's talk about The Penguin.
All right.
Let's talk about The Penguin. It's one of the hottest shows out right now.
Uh,
Um, I'm sure, sorry to put you in the spotlight, but it's great. I've been watching it. I was catching
you
up, in preparation for this. You did a fantastic job. Congratulations.
Thanks.
How was the process? How was it working on this one for you?
It was really fun. I actually, I auditioned for that show for a few different roles over the course of this thing, and that's the one that ended up. I didn't. Uh, that's the one that they ended up seeing me in, which is great. And being able to work with Dee Dee O'Connell, who I've known for a long time through theater in New York, and
Okay.
she's kind of a New York theater legend. And we've done readings and stuff together, but we never really got to dig into anything. And that was a really fun thing. I think she's really wonderful in that show, and it's just such a it's a great uh, kind of unusual character for television, and it's a great kind of as sort of as it fits into Oz's origin story. It's a great strange character, and she does such amazing things with it. And so I was really happy to be able to have a kind of nice meaty scene with her. Um, but yeah, it was fun. Uh, the process was strange because they were very, very, as maybe with the superhero stuff, they're
Hush,
just
hush.
everything's close to the vest, so it's hard to squeeze any information out of anybody about
Yeah.
who exactly you are
Yeah.
and what you're doing.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I did get that I, you know, I, kind of from the beginning of working on it was that they were seeing Rex something as like a kind of analog to Chaz Palminteri's character in A Bronx Tale. So I don't know if you ever saw that movie, but Chaz Palminteri plays a kind of not small town. Currently, it's New York, but he's basically like he's the big guy on the block, but he's not necessarily really that big of a guy. And in The Penguin, Rex, to a kid, looks like he's just, you know, the glossiest. He got a jazz club. He's this, but actually Rex is probably a small player. He handles, this corner and that corner and, the neighborhood, however many blocks that is, but probably isn't much bigger than that. But within the context of Oz's kind of uh
Well, within his world.
imagination.
Yeah, as a
Yeah,
kid.
yeah, yeah, his kid's eye view of the world,
Yeah.
it's a really big thing, and so that was sort of the kinda hint that they gave me that I took that as my, like,
Sure.
starting point, yeah.
Well, I'm glad you hit on this because that was kind of my follow-up question, which is your character's mentioned in the first episode,
Yeah,
but we don't see him till episode 7.
yeah.
So I imagine as an actor, it's gotta be like jumping onto a moving train, like they've already established the world, it's moving,
Yeah,
it's moving, and then boom, here you are. And not only that, I mean, not to give it away, y'all had enough time to watch it, but it's a flashback scene.
yeah.
So your character is tantamount to building this world and establishing helping to establish who Ozcob is. After you booked it and after they could give you a little more information, what was that process of making sure that you understood the world and were able to jump into the deep end?
Well, since we're talking, actors' process here,
Mhm.
the truth is there was not a whole lot more than that.
Oh, okay.
And one of the things that happens when you are, I was in 2 episodes of this show. Um, you don't necessarily get a lot of information. The show's been running. It was a machine that had been going for a little while, and actually, I think they had to take a pause for various reasons during their production, went a little longer than they thought it was gonna go. I But in any case, one thing that happens often as you're and, if you do episodic television, you're often thrown into a world where you're like, "Okay, we gotta get your bearings pretty
Y
quickly."
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And, the help for that is, you know, um, uh, costume and hair and makeup design sort of tell you something. And yeah, sort of it's a little bit of a period thing in a way, kind of maybe the early 80s, the flashback takes place.
Right.
It's not it's Gotham, so it's an imaginary world, but it's kind of based on New York that way. So you get little clues, and honestly, you got to make some choices pretty quickly. You get I'm thinking of so for this show, I remember the first day I got there really early one morning, and I don't know what had gone wrong, but something had already gone wrong with the day, just crew wise. And my thing was, you know, it wasn't. It was one of these situations where you kind of get prepped, and then you're waiting, and then and then it's time to go, and you go and you do something, and you sort of talk to a couple people that are there, a producer hanging out watching. Where are we? What are we thinking? Oh, it's great. Okay, we'll do this. Try it this way. The director, who's I don't know if he just directed that episode, but a lot of times it's just a different director every episode. They're in a similar position to you. I worked with two different directors on that show. Um, so yeah, so some of it is just
Just you. Just
the trusting that you've been cast properly and that your sort of basic idea is not too far off. And, a couple times you'll do something and they'll say, we're remember, we're this world." And you go, "Okay, okay, sorry."
man. Well, and I don't know if you even know this information because as you said, DC, Marvel, these studios, they keep everything so close to the vest. Do you see, much of a future for your character? I feel like they left it pretty open for him.
To be honest, I don't really follow that stuff too much. I mean,
Sure.
it's fun to act in, but it's not really my personal, um
Not your style of TV?
yeah, yeah, or just, I don't know comic books that well. It's
Oh,
just not,
sure, sure.
so I don't know the backstories and thing. My understanding from talking to somebody else about it was that
Mhm.
there's all kinds of backstory stuff with, the crime family. I think is called the Falcones.
Yep.
There's that exists in the comic books, which I don't know anything about that. And
Yeah. But
um
but 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 I think this is really I actually love that you're like, "I have no idea," be because I feel like actors in our process, it's so easy to like, "Oh my god," like, it's so easy to wanna turn into a dramaturg
yeah,
where like, "Oh, I
yeah,
need to know exactly where my character went to elementary school
yeah,
and who was his first girlfriend."
yeah,
But for you, what was that handhold for you? If it wasn't the comics, because his character is in the comics, apparently from what I could see, like,
yeah,
or from what I read, he's more of a recent character. He's not like, not what my parents grew up reading,
uh-huh,
more of like, mid-2000s actually, or early 2000s, so a recent addition to
mhm,
the Batman franchise is
mhm.
Rex. Um, so if that wasn't a part of your process, what was your handhold? How were you able to step in and do this thing?
The 2 things really. Number 1 is always just what's on the page, that's what we're working with. So the human interactions, and there's all kinds of ways to do that, but just in a really straightforward way, what's on the page is what people are going to know about me ultimately. Most people that watch the show, I mean, I don't know how, I know there's some super fan, comic book super fan, but most people that watch the show, if it does well, are going to be people who are more or less innocent of the backstory and all that stuff. So they're not worried about that. Um, I kind of trust the director producer to tell me, look, this, the important things. Um, but also what's on the page. So between, in the scene with Dee Dee, for example, I'm interested in one, she's been on the show for the whole time. So what's she trying to, like, what does this mean for her? Because I'm just coming in to do a thing on that, to sort of turn the plot in a particular direction, but she has a whole life that's built up over the course of this thing. Where does this fit into her story? So I'm trying to work with that, but then also just how do I read the scene? And then the other side, for me in this particular instance, it's not always the same, but in this particular instance was the voice because as I was saying earlier, the kind of hint about Chaz Palminteri um, being the sort of neighborhood crime boss in A Bronx Tale. There was something about his voice that was that really stood out to me. So I'd watched that movie again, and I listened to him do a couple interviews from around the time he made that movie, and there was just something in it that I liked about his voice. If you've watched the show, so you can, there is a lot of like Colin Farrell's doing a really strong dialect.
Yeah.
Christian Miliotti's doing a really strong dialect. Dee Dee's doing a strong dialect. It's a very particular kind of old school New York thing where you're telling the Boyds, it's really heavy. And I I wanted to have a little bit of a distinction from what they were doing. And this was also from, what the producer um was behind this idea. Um and Chaz is a New York guy, and he has this kind of, it's a lighter voice, it kind of flows. It's very New York, but it's a gentle thing. There's something like softer to it, and I like that. It's kind of, there's something kind of, I
And
don't
it's
know,
a bit ironic, and there's a juxtaposition between, like,
yeah,
how you present, because and I love that first shot of you,
yeah,
he's sitting on the corner smoking the
yeah, yeah,
cigar,
yeah, yeah,
you're like, "Oh, this dude's a boss,"
yeah,
you
and it
know?
makes it, having that little distinction is like, it tells a story pretty quick. You don't have that much time. This also, in this case, I'm in 2 episodes, the scenes aren't that big. There's not a whole lot of storytelling time, so make a quick, choice that's strong enough that it's kind of, you know, gives you some, definition.
I love that. Now, you mentioned that you went in for this project a few times, I guess, what was that, earlier this calendar year?
You know, it was a long time. I had a callback for one of the parts that I was still shooting Billions, so I don't that was a while
It's
ago.
like 2 years ago.
Yeah,
Billions wrapped.
because I remember it was a day I was on lunch at Billions when I did the callback.
Wow. So this has been in process for a
So it's
while.
been going for a while. Yeah,
Okay, okay.
yeah, and it was
Copy.
very, I can't remember what they told me initially, but I remember initially it was very, like, under wraps. You weren't supposed to
Gotcha.
say anything, PSAs, all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so separate from this project, we got an email from SAG. They're like, "Hey, audition." I don't know if you saw or did it, but there's like an audition survey, and they were like asking questions about the post-strike experience auditioning and such. Um, Now knowing that this project was kind of already in the works pre-strike, how have things been for you post-strike? Have you noticed a considerable difference in opportunities?
Uh, it's strange because, yeah, so this was definitely pre-strike.
Yeah.
Um, uh, the strike started right at the end of, because Billions was just finishing its last episode. I guess I was really lucky during the strike because I got on 2 projects that got waivers. One that was, very indie kind of, fly by the seat of its pants kinda thing, um, and it was very good for him because the project was ready to go. When the strike happened, he, you know, really did whatever, and I think people were, he was, like, calling 24/7 to get the thing, to get the waiver, to do the for weeks, he the producer director of that project really got on it and made the project happen with a waiver, and that meant that a lot of people were like, "Oh, there's a project happening that has a waiver. I'd like to work on something."
Right. Yes,
Um,
please.
that was pretty cool for his, project. That's a movie called Mooch that also features Scott Cohen, who, is another Penguin, um, uh, I don't know, what do you call him, an alum? He also is, he's another Penguin crime boss. Uh, but and then the other thing was and there was another movie that was, a bigger production, but also managed to get, um, the waiver, and so I was really lucky. I had 2 pretty decent, projects going during the strike because of the waivers, and then,
No, and that's fair. I obviously you've heard about different experiences everybody's been having.
yeah,
So some have been struggling, some haven't. But it's all fair. It's all like the reality of this crazy industry that we're in.
yeah,
You
and
know,
it's I don't know what other people's lives are like now, but I had once the strike was over and things were rolling, I had a good first half of the year, and then it's been very, very quiet.
yeah, yeah,
So, you kind
yeah.
of brace yourself and do what you can, and,
Mhm.
um, I think the industry is in a funny place where it doesn't know what to do with what it has at the moment.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Well, speaking of, being in this world of comic books, I feel like every hero or villain has an origin story. And Lewis, I'd like to know your origin story. How did you come to acting?
I did a bit of community theater when I was a kid in the Seattle area. Um, my sister started up with this little theater company, um, and so I would go see her in plays, and I thought, "That looks pretty fun, and maybe I could do that too." So I did a bit of that when I was a kid, and then I kind of lost interest in it, and, um, it wasn't really till college I found some I don't know, some people who were doing what I thought was interesting stuff, kinda crazy stuff that I was like, let's" so, kinda, I don't know, avant-garde type stuff, which I was pretty into, and so a lot of my college experience was dedicated to, making experimental theater, and that kinda continued into my, post-college once I was out in the world. I don't know, I was never particularly ambitious about doing other stuff, but you also are like, "Well, I don't wanna be a temp forever."
Right, right, right,
So,
right. Yeah,
gotta find some way to make a living and,
yeah.
so you get lucky here or there, and I mean, that was kinda my way in was really, I was interested in, theater as an art form and yeah.
I love to hear that. It looks to me like at least the last, 10, 15 years, a bulk of your career has been in, on screen.
Yeah.
Um, but I was listening to an interview recently with Denzel Washington, and he was saying, you learn how to act on stage. Like you learn how to act in the theater. And so I'm not surprised at all that that's where you
Yeah.
started. And even something like experimental theater, like that's not even, our
Yeah.
classic typical work. I
Yeah.
think I agree with him. It's like that's where you learn how to act. And, the experimental stuff, the improvisational stuff, the now we call it like devised theater,
Yeah,
um, that kind of thing. I'm like, I feel like that's where actors find their voice,
yeah,
whenever you have the opportunity to create yourself. So I think that's pretty cool.
yeah.
Um, Now I was looking through your credits, and like I said earlier, it looks like I know looks can be deceiving. It looks like you've been working very consistently for the last 20 years or so.
Yeah,
But
God,
to
doesn't always feel that way.
right,
God,
right, you know what I'm saying? You had you had one episode here or there, and then you had a recurring on Blue Bloods, and then Billions. Seems, at least from the outside looking in, seems like your breakout. How did you stay patient until that moment?
man, I don't know how patient I was, but I definitely there were plenty of times when I thought, "Okay, now I'm really going to send in my application to grad school and do some other thing with my life." And, honestly, I just was always saved by something came along and I was sucked back in. Um, e I also always had other stuff on the side, I think. I mean, theater is a big part of that. Theater takes and it doesn't necessarily show up because it's you do it and then it's gone. There's a record of it somewhere, but, the record is like, "Yeah, this was a production somewhere, and here's the cast."
Right.
Yeah, and, it's also I kind of think of it I lived through an interesting period where when I got to New York, for example, I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have a cell phone for
Sure.
years after I moved to New York.
Hmm.
It wasn't that time yet, you know? Once sort of like 2006, 7, 8, things really started to online things started to happen more, started to take over more of the culture, and then when smartphones happened, that shifted things in a big way. I mean, I, uh, I think I arrived in New York anticipating a different kind of future, which was more like, you were talking about Denzel, like there was a kind of path that used to exist and maybe still does to some degree, but where, you would start in the theater, you would get some jobs in maybe TV or film. Most people, it used to be just film. Working in TV was a little bit, déclassé or something.
Yeah, it's not that's
Um,
not what the stars did.
yeah, and it's
Yeah.
certainly that's totally flipped,
Yeah.
uh, by this point. So I feel like I kind of lived through this transition that the culture was going through, and in a technological sense, but also, theaters. Um, I know theaters also had to transform, and it's not, it's
Yeah,
going
no,
through a
it's
tough
different.
period itself. It's hard to
Yeah.
compete with all the everything that's screaming for your attention all the time. Everybody's got one of these things to entertain them.
Right in your hand.
Yeah, right in your hand. So
Yeah.
why be bothered to?
Yeah. Well, Lewis, and this wasn't a part of my planned script, but I was riding the train back home an hour and a half ago, and I was just, on social media, and I saw this post and I had to screenshot it. And I'm gonna read it to you. It's on a public platform, so apologies if the person didn't want to share it, but they shared it publicly. So
Okay.
um they said, I think it's time for me to quit this industry. I don't have it in me anymore to keep taking rejection after rejection where I work so damn hard to produce the work I do in these rooms. The sacrifices I make constantly go unnoticed and it sucks. It's discouraging seeing where this industry is moving to where we aren't willing to take chances on undiscovered stars. I'm truly exhausted. Sincerely, a depleted artist. And this is an actor.
Mm.
Um, and I read that and I was like, who? And I thought about this part that I was hoping we'd get to in the interview, which is, as you just described, existing and living through and
Yep.
trying to make a name for yourself during times of change in
Mm.
the business. And you experience it in a different way. That's crazy to think about a time where cell phones didn't exist. Now that's how we film our auditions.
Yeah.
You have any advice for somebody who's in the place of this artist who's just feeling like, "Man, this sucks."
Part of being an actor, I mean, I don't know what anybody's sort of what the average batting average is, but I mean, most of what you do, it goes nowhere. You know, it's a especially for an actor, you know, an actor, you can often feel pretty helpless because without somebody saying, "I choose you," you've got nothing to do. You know, if you're a writer, director, you create your own project, there's a certain initiative you can take. Actors can do it too if they become writer, director, etc. But in terms of, you know, actor's an interesting creature because I think in the pure form, an actor is in service of somebody else's vision. It's a great book called The Invisible Actor.
Yeah, we'll put a link to it in the show notes.
Part of it is about, you know, the actor's not actually the role, purpose, etc., is not to be, you know, a celebrity, a figure of this. Actually, the actor's purpose is to dissolve into another world that's being created collectively with, you know, other actors, director, etc., and to truly inhabit, you know, commit to the belief of being in that other world. And in that sense, yeah, you come out of that world and people are like, "Hey, that's great," or whatever may say, and that's part of a career. But in terms of a kind of like purpose, um, maybe it helps to you know, think of that purpose, which is to, you know, not to be out in front of things, but actually to be, you know, kind of in, you know, maybe so in harmony with it that you don't even notice it. I mean, the other thing I would, you know, and this is not, you know, the arts in general are not easy. Um, I get the feeling too of like, you know, why isn't this what I'm doing worth anything to anybody? And as you said, you know, there's many, many years, you know, I was out there for a long time before anybody, um, you know, wanted to, you know, give me anything that I could live on to do this. But you know, sometimes, you know, and maybe this is helpful coming from an experimental theater background where there's just no expectation that anybody's going to care what you're doing. You know, I would go out with friends and we would do stuff and make things. And yeah, we thought we were interesting and that we were making cool stuff, but we didn't kid ourselves that that somebody else, you know, we wanted to kind of freak people out a little bit and we wanted people to be interested, but we also I don't mean we had lower expectations of it. I think we kind of our expectations were like we understood we weren't doing like Broadway stuff.
Right. Yeah.
You know, we understood we weren't doing big commercial things and we were working within our sphere. Um and I do think just in general, like nobody owes you anything. And it's not that you don't deserve it. It's not that you're not great, but um kind of taking a, you know, this is maybe just this is like sort of a life outlook kind of thing. But starting from a place of somebody owes me something is, you know, I'm sure it works for some people, but I don't I don't know that that's a good way to approach things because then when you come into a room to audition, for example, you're already kind of antagonistic. You're at odds with the person and you're kind of like, what are you going to give me this or not or something like that, but it's not about giving you something. When you go into an audition room, and I know a lot of casting directors at this point, not that you don't get along with all the casting directors you go in front of, but the good ones, they want is for somebody to come in the room and solve their problem. That's all
Right.
they want. They want somebody to come in and make their day be over because they found the person. The good ones are truly rooting for every person that comes in. They want to see you do your best work. They don't want you to be uncomfortable and feel bad about yourself because that tends not to produce good work. They want you to come in and but they just, but there's 15 people and yeah, there's all these other factors and sometimes it does come down to, this person has you know, a big reputation at this point, and this one doesn't, so the producers are like, "Yeah, we like to have that," but, but truly, I think most of the time, um, and maybe you just gotta take it on faith, but most of the time, I think people are looking for you, actually. They do want to find you, and, um, you know, uh, I guess try to meet them where they're going. I don't know.
No, I think, Louis, I'm just sitting with what you just said because it's a lesson I need to take in, which is we the inherent job of the actor is to be in service of the story.
Mm,
And like you said, if you go in the room expecting someone to give you something that you're owed, it's counterintuitive to the work actually.
mm,
As I'm sitting here thinking about it, I'm like, how can you go in saying you owe me this if your job is to serve? It's those two
yeah,
things, they're not right. So I'm just sitting
yeah,
here and like, oh, you're so right. You're so right. You're so right. And hopefully, I don't know if this particular artist listens to this show, but I hope they do. And I hope that anyone else who's feeling that way can really take something away from this because I know I have. It just like just immediately I'm like, oh, yep. I needed that. I needed that. Um,
good. Well, and it's not to diminish how hard it can be too because, look, there are many dark nights of the soul as you're trying to anybody who's a creator of any kind, it's all you're constantly struggling with your self-doubt, with how do
yeah,
people think about what I'm doing and
yeah. But
yeah.
mindset matters. And I think having the appropriate mindset helps because this thing is a marathon. And like you said, you didn't know when you were gonna get discovered,
Yeah,
and so it's like we can't put a date on it. And so what do you do to make sure that you can keep going?
yeah.
That may be the important thing.
And
Um,
I'll say
yeah,
this too, it doesn't really like, discovered, I mean, yeah, some people it's pretty obvious that somebody just came out of nowhere, they were discovered and they're a big star, but, I don't I don't know how it looks from the outside. I don't feel like I've been discovered or anything. I feel like I've been at it for a long time. And, and I'll and having known a few people who are, from the outside, you'd think this person's an absolute star. It doesn't necessarily get better. They still, you know, somebody who's had a lot of success can still think, well, that's probably the last job, and now everybody hates me because I screwed that thing up or whatever. It's not that part is something that always needs to be worked on because every time you show up, it's for a new thing and you're meeting new people, and it's just, are you going to be able to do it? You did it once, but does that mean you can do it again? And
right. And success is relative,
yeah,
so what yeah, no, that's important. Um, Lewis, before I let you go,
yeah,
uh, the thematic question for the show, it's called The Actor's Instrument.
yeah.
Um, what is your defining quality that you bring to the table as a storyteller? What sets Louis Cancelmi apart?
I don't know what anybody would say from the outside, but I I like to go at it. I like to go at it. I like to make it real if I can. Um, I like to play. I don't know that that sets me apart, but um, it is something that I bring. I like to bring the whole instrument, the whole body, voice, um, soul, um, and yeah. I don't know if that sets me apart, but that's
Something sets you apart, Louis. And I can even through this screen, I can feel it. Um, Thank you so much for sharing with us today. So great to meet you. I interviewed another guest yesterday, and I was like, I've been at this podcast for over a year now. My managers just joined on as producers, and
Mm,
really before now, I've known every person that's come onto the show. We're like 50 episodes in. So now I'm at this place where I'm like meeting new people for the first time
yeah,
as we're doing it. And so knowing that we did not know each other before this, I really appreciate you carving out some time to share, to give some advice, and some insight into what has helped you to stay in this thing and continue to work at it, as you say.
my pleasure, and thanks. It's great meeting you, and all success with this production and with everything else you're doing.
If you enjoyed today's conversation with Louis Cancelmi, then you'll love the recent interview I did with Robert O'Hara. So be sure to check that out if you haven't already. And that's it for today, folks. Big thanks to all of our listeners for tapping into this episode of The Actor's Instrument. If you're streaming, give us a follow. And if you're on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you never miss a beat. The Actor's Instrument is a presentation of Red Letter Entertainment, executive producers Adam Jellicourse, Serena Esposito, and yours truly. We'll be back next Tuesday. Till next time, y'all. Peace.